All right, on today's episode, we have my soul sister who makes my accolades and success in business look and feel like kindergarten. But that's not the reason I had her, because she has all of that and she also has all the wisdom to share and all the pieces to help you get there. We talk about how every entrepreneur hits a ceiling at some point, and when they get there, they stay stuck there because they asked the wrong question. How if you have a big, hairy, audacious goal, but it's overwhelming you instead of being excited to achieve it, how to fix it. How we forget that when our businesses grow, so do we as people, and we have to deconstruct before we reconstruct. The power of being and what it actually means to be. How most of us, myself included, started a business to create freedom, but ended up trapped in the vehicle that we created for that freedom. The Speed of Trust by Stephen Covey is an incredible book, but Staci breaks down how the two things we trust on are character and competency, and how we cut ourselves out at the knees and how to rebuild it for ourselves. Are you disempowering your clients and teams by being the best hero? One of my favorite quotes that she dropped on the show, she has it on the wall in her office, and it says, if you want to be responsible, keep your promise to others. If you want to be successful, keep your promises to yourself. She breaks down her 3-step process, the CCH, for your process to self-trust. She talks about her perfectionism performance trap, and how to get out of it. How we have the desire to cling to certainty, and it creates the urge and trap of control. How you should have flexibility with your ability and how to navigate that. One of my favorite model she shares is her end model to discern. So basically to alert, notice, and discern to determine if you're operating from faith and fear. Her definition of success being inner congruence and what that means. The hardest question that it takes to answer as a human and an entrepreneur, and the easiest place to find it. How when you're all gas, meaning it's more, how you lose connection with yourself. A profound question, and I have so many notes, I'm sharing like the high level, a profound question that one of her friends asked. That could you trust that you're being developed if you're not developing yourself? How one of the biggest secrets to success, especially with all that she navigated, let go of, and came back now, is focusing on playing instead of performing. And when you hit the enough is enough moment, you can either numb or kneel, and how to reframe the awareness of kneeling and what that means to your breakthroughs, and how most people operate in counterfeit connection, and how to create real connection to have the success you want in your life and business. That plus so much more with my incredible friend and soul sister Staci. And so I can't do this episode justice. And so I'm going to let us get right into it. So get a notepad, get your hearts open and ready to receive all this. And without further ado, let's get into the show. All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Mind of George Show. And if my background looks different, I do not have Louis Vuitton bags, and it was not my 29th birthday of pink balloons, but you know I'm a backpack princess. And I am in Canada celebrating Canadian Thanksgiving, but also recording a podcast on this beautiful day of things to be grateful for, which is a perfect segue to my gratitude for today's guest, because I feel like when I got gifted the pleasure of meeting this incredible woman, I found my long lost sister, and somebody that I told her even before this on another call that I will be sad if you are not in my life in 2 to 3 decades from now, because you just are a gift and you're radiant. But before I bring her on, the only word that comes to mind is awe, and awe in the most respectful, inspiring, empowering way, because every time I hear her speak, I learn something. Every time I learn more about her story, I'm humbled by her greatness from the levels that she's walked through her experience, the things she's created, her success in business, which is something I can't even shake a stick at. But most importantly, her success as a magical human being, that every time she speaks is wisdom that I take home to my soul, and always genuinely makes my life better, makes my viewpoint of the world better, and most importantly, it makes me excited to live in this life and be in this world because of the gifts that she has to share. And so I can't do it any more justice, and I could give you taglines and I could give you numbers and I could give you all of those things, but I think the most important thing is that I just feel like today's guest, Staci, is one of the greatest gifts to humanity that I've ever met, and I'm honored to call her a sister, call her a friend, and I'm really excited to listen because she tickles my soul every single time that we speak. And so, Staci, welcome to the show.
Oh my goodness, George. I feel like that is the intro of a mirror.
Mm,
I feel the same about you. When we met, I was like, the way we could unmask, not just spiritually, but in business, and hold the container for such growth and hard truths and awareness was as much a gift to me as it has been to you.
yeah. Yeah, and just so everybody knows, I met Stacy in person for the first time at our last event in Montana, and I think within 5 minutes we were both crying, and in the most beautiful, beautiful of ways. And I was like, I know you. And she's like, I know you. And I'm like, yeah, we definitely know each other. And as the time has progressed, we realized how connected we are through so many people. And I was like, well, what a magical moment that we got to meet now. And so thank you, received, and to be in integrity with how I run the show. Just so everybody knows, I had the blessing of being on a call with Stacy for 90 minutes before this podcast as well. So I've already gotten my daily dose of Stacy, which is something I might coin in the future, because I think everybody needs a daily dose of Stacy. But we were talking about how to start the show, and I was like, I want you to give him dessert. And I feel like every single time we get on a call or we connect, you're always like, I took somebody through this and it shifted this, and I took him through this and it shifted this. And I was like, Stacy, I just need you to share this magic with everybody. And one of the things that we were talking about is how most entrepreneurs end up feeling stuck in their life and in their business because they ask themselves the wrong question and go about creating the solutions they want the wrong way. And so I'm just going to leave the floor to you and let you unpack that in its entirety, because I'm excited to listen.
Mm. Yeah, having worked with so many entrepreneurs, everyone hits a ceiling at some point. And the ceiling that they hit, they start asking, like, okay, what can I do? How can I fix this? And that's often the wrong question, because it's how they're being. And when we start focusing on how they're showing up as a human, as a leader, and how they're being, then solutions start emerging and appearing. And I mean, I've done this in my own life, and George, I think you have too, is you hit these ceilings and you're like, I want out of this pain. For whatever reason, in my business, I'm drowning in operational chaos. I am behind the eight ball. I'm on the verge of losing my sanity. My relationships are suffering. I have a revolving door of people. I have this big, hairy, audacious goal that I just want to achieve. And for whatever reason, it's out of reach. And what can I do? And they'll say to me, I'll do whatever it takes. And I say, well, whatever it takes might look different than what you think whatever it takes looks like. And that often looks like them changing their self-construct. Their psychological view on themselves and their business is not serving them and is not producing the results that they want in their business or their life or even in their relationships. And they have to make a shift. And deconstructing to reconstruct is a journey that I think every leader can choose to go on if they want to have a different type of business and a different kind of life, and really the ability to wake up in their dream life and it feel like they want it to feel.
Mm. I haven't heard BHAG tossed around in a minute. For those that don't know, BHAG is big, hairy, audacious goal, and I love that. And I want to unpack this a little bit, because I feel like I've fallen into this trap too. And even speaking to the pain that you speak about, like, I know I see this with a lot of my one-on-one clients, but really I see this in the mirror more than anything. And it's this point of like, okay, cool, all of this stuff was working, amazing, and it's now no longer working. And it's either I'm catching it because of pain, meaning like cash flows down, I'm overwhelmed, I'm dreading going to work, or I have this sneaking suspicion in my intuition of like, this doesn't feel like it's going to keep going. Like, there needs an adjustment to be made, whether it's an offer or how I do events or even how I coach and facilitate people. But to your point, and I can speak this to me personally, the thing that doesn't shift that is adding more to the same day to day, or like trying to do more marketing or get more attention or put more pressure on it, for lack of better terms. You're speaking about deconstructing before you reconstruct. I think a trap that I've fallen into is thinking that like, oh, and I know this personally, like, oh, I have this mastermind. It's going to run for the next 15 years, just like it is. Or, hey, all I do is I coach people in intensives. I'm just going to be doing intensives until I retire. And God has a very funny way of humbling me and realizing like, oh no, that's not what it looks like, including like I stopped coaching for years and I was like, I will never be a coach again. And yet now I spend 99% of my time coaching and I love it more than anything in the world. And so in that thing, when we talk about we're asking the wrong question, we typically fall into the old trap of do, be, have, in the personal development world, but it's really be, do, have. And so I would love from your perspective because I feel like it almost feels intangible in nature because it's counterintuitive to what we believe as entrepreneurs. And I know you as an entrepreneur, quite frankly, will outdo and have outdone all of us when it comes to execution. So I also feel like you have a lot of authority and credibility to speak here because you are like the queen of running circles around everybody, or was in a previous life and less embodied version. But could you like break that down of like what it means to be, or like how do you go about being and asking the right questions and creating space to give some like texture to it?
Yeah, I guess to answer that, I think I'm going to talk about it in the
Story.
way I was doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll just talk from myself because my story has been every leader's story that I've seen. Circumstances maybe look a little bit different. How they got there maybe looks a little bit different, but the frameworks and the themes are very similar. A lot of us set out to build businesses to create freedom. And then we end up trapped in the very businesses designed to create our freedom. And then the people around us start calling us control freaks. You won't let go. And we're like, okay, well, I'll just do this and I'll set this up and I'll set it to the side and then they can run it and then I'll go on to this next thing. And we have all of these plates spinning and then they don't all stay spinning. And so different plates start crashing down and then you go try to pick up the pieces. And then before you know it, everything's crumbling and you can't keep it all together because it's too much to control. And a business is a living organism. It's going to grow, it's going to evolve, but you as a human and as a leader, you're going to grow and you're going to evolve. And that's what happened for me. I thought that I was going to do business a very specific way. I thought that I was going to organize to scale everybody else's businesses and I was going to scale that operations, help leaders become untrapped and scale their operations. Turns out it's really hard to run 36 businesses at one time. And even though I'm a good doer, it's just humanly impossible. And then I had to let go of an identity that I had about who I was going to be and how I was going to show up as a leader. And so I had to say, okay, I'm not going to run everyone's businesses. I'm going to teach people and empower people to run their own businesses and prototype the things that I've done and how I've been that has materialized. And so for me, coming back to being, it's learning to really sit with the parts of myself that show up well. So I can show up on a meeting and come with intention. And what that looks like is I have a one-on-one meeting with my integrator or my marketing team or my sales team. And I come in and say, how can I build trust in this meeting? Not what metric am I going to ask them to hit, not what am I going to come down on them for not achieving or not doing, but how can I build trust? And there's a really good book by Stephen Covey called Speed of Trust. And it talks about how we trust people on two things. We trust them on their character and we trust them on their competency. And somebody could have high character, but not be competent. And so we don't really trust them. Or somebody has high competency, but they have low character. And so ends don't justify the means. And so we don't fully trust them. And so part of creating a trust on a 1 hour long meeting with my team is to say, okay, we've got this target to hit. And I want to help you become the type of person who can hit this target. What are your blocks? What's holding you back? Where are you stuck? And how can I facilitate a breakthrough for you so you can build self-trust and you can build self-confidence and that you can own executing on this and making it happen versus everything rolling up to me to be the one to solve it, to do it. And so I was disempowering people because I was such a good hero. And I had to learn to empower other heroes. And I spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on coaching for this. Probably millions of minutes. That's a better way of saying it. So much time realizing that how I was being inside of my company was hurting the people around me because I was doing for them what they can and should do for themselves. And I had to learn to let them become the heroes and facilitate that transformation. And George, you do this so well. This is your gift to the world, is to be that lighthouse in the dark. And when people on our teams aren't hitting their metrics, or they're not getting the results that they want inside of their organizations, or they're not achieving whatever revenue target that they have, often it's because there are psychological roadblocks within them as leaders that we get the opportunity to facilitate that transformation versus everything being transactional.
Yeah, and I'm going to ask you a question about this because number one, yes, all day, every day. And I think to my earlier even intro of you is one of those places is in the mirror. And I know that all too often it's really, really easy when you have a team of 10 or 20 or 30. You see a lot more symptoms a lot faster because it's all rising to the surface. And I feel like one of the sneaky places it hides is when you're a team of one or two and you have some like independent contractors or just yourself in that same vein, to where we almost fall into the trap of not even having trust in ourselves because of either our character or competency. And so how do you recommend, or what are your views on that when it comes to like even you, right? Knowing like the amount of success you've had and the amount of commas that are in it, right? On paper, everybody would celebrate, right? And even you now walking into a new evolution and shifting how you do things. How do you navigate that with yourself to realize that a lot of times, and I can only speak for myself, a lot of the quote unquote failures or lessons I learned is because I was cutting myself off at the knees and I was basically falling into that trap. So how do you navigate that in the lens of like just what I see in the mirror?
I think I've broken trust with myself so many times. And I think I'm not alone in that journey. I think we make promises to ourselves and then we don't follow through on it. I have a quote in my office on the wall that says, if you want to be responsible, keep your promises to others. If you want to be successful, keep your promises to yourself. And many times, not just once, not just twice, I'm like the person who has to make the mistake 7, 8, 9, 10 times just to make sure I got the lesson.
I feel called
So
out right now.
yes. Oh, yes. Well, mirror, right?
Yep.
Back in the mirror. So I can really, I think, speak to this from so many ways, from personal demons I've had to slay, from relationships that have gone south, for ways that I turned a blind eye to things when I knew better, like my soul was screaming at me, violating my own intuition. I've done that, and I've done it many times. And the journey back to self-trust, I've actually turned into a process for myself. And in 2016, I wrote a book about it, and it's re-emerging in my life, which is very interesting. And the process is courage, choice, habits. And step one is courage, and that's just to embrace the brutal facts. And that comes from a business book, but it's also just true in my personal life, where I have to say, this is ugly. This is a shadow part of me where I said I was going to do this and I didn't do it. And instead of saying to myself, it's okay, I'll do it tomorrow, or it's okay, everyone will understand, or it's okay, anyone else in my shoes would have done the same thing. But for me, that's not okay. So I have to say to myself, and have the courage to say to myself, like, hey, Stace, you said this and you didn't follow through. What's going on? Where's the resistance coming from? Where have you broken rapport with yourself? Where have you put too much on your plate and you don't have the capacity to do it? And so you're making promises that you can't follow through on. And so we need to adjust our expectations. And so I journal. I'm an avid journal. I've been journaling since 1998 when my grandma gave me my first journal, and I have every single one of them still. And I write out the brutal facts. Like, this is what you said, and this is what you did, and this is where you're not aligned. And then I have a choice. I have a choice to do it differently. I have a choice to apologize to myself. I have the choice to go apologize to the people that I violated in my overcommitment or my zeal or my desire to prove something or validation or significance. And then step 3 is habits. I put in place new habits for myself and accountability systems where if I say I'm going to do it, it's on my calendar And I create buddy systems where I go work out with somebody, or I have a prayer partner, or I have some type of community. I have found in my own life that I stick with things when I'm in community. When I'm not in community, it's so much easier for me to break those with myself. So I used to think like, gosh, Stace, you're so weak. Why do you have to have somebody else to get you to do it? And I'm like, I don't think I was designed as a human to live in disconnection. I'm designed for connection. And so when I started leaning into it and realizing the power of that in my life, it was transformational. And that really helped me heal body image issues, framing I had with money that wasn't serving me, uh, relationship, even with love, and different things in my life where I thought that I had to live in, if I do this, then I can't do that. And it created this, it started to facilitate more of a world where I could be both. I could live in a world of and I could embrace the brutal facts and experience the hard truths and live in a bubble of grace and accept the grace of forgiveness and the journey of humanity. And the more I've started to offer myself that self empathy and also the accountability, both, it's allowed me to start facilitating that in my relationships where, yes, this happened and I still love you. And we're not going to keep this pattern up. We're going to do something different because I want to facilitate trust and belonging and courage and grit and resilience, because the human journey is a character development journey. And the more we lean into it and the faster we lean into it, the more we can experience the joy of the journey versus the noise in our brain about shaming or blaming that really just paralyzes us and, to your point, cuts us off at the knees. We get to do that differently. So the self-trust journey for me has been courage, choice, habits.
I love that. And I want to ask, and it's really probably an easy answer, but I think for me, in the lens of even what I was sharing earlier about like the finish line of like, oh, I'm going to run this mastermind this way forever, or this is the offer that's going to take me to the moon, or any of those things, I feel like there's this trap of like, well, I got it now, it's in forever. And when it comes to self-trust, and by the way, I love this process of courage, right? Because going in, as one of my clients' mom says, and I got to give her full credit. So Bonnie, you get full credit for this. One of her sayings is go in eyes wide open, right? Like fully acknowledging the current state, which actually creates a place of empowerment, not disempowerment, because anything else is basically having a reactive decision. And then like going in eyes wide open and having the courage to face it and look at it is really the biggest part of the breakthrough. And then you have the ability to make choices based on what follows. And then when you make those choices, you can use your environment, your support system, your community, and share with them your habits and the things that are, for your terms, going to hold you accountable. But I would love to know if, like, when it comes to this self-trust, because as a woman who does this and has lived through this, because I know your story, and you're welcome to share all of it and any of it that you want, but also who facilitates so many people just like I do, because we are on similar paths, to where there's times for me, and I would just love your view on this, where it's almost like 6 times a day I'm going through courage, choices, and habits. And then there's other seasons where it's like once a month. But it's not this like, oh, I got it, it's gonna stick forever. It typically comes in, and then I'm like, here's my direction, here's the next mile marker of the race. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna finish this marathon, and I get to mile 2 and I'm like, not finishing that race, going in a different direction. So like, how is that for you, or have you seen the same thing? Because I feel like it's also important to go in eyes wide open with an understanding of like, just because we develop self-trust in this moment because something breaks, or we're a byproduct or now a slave to this business that we created as a vehicle, that when you go through that alignment process, it's not forever. It's really until the next mile marker. What's your like take or view on that?
Yeah, I call what you just described the performance perfection trap.
Ooh,
And it's easy to get caught in, right? Because we establish these standards for ourselves. And having standards is good. As a society, as a human being, as a culture, we need standards. I think we're witnessing in the world what happens when we don't have standards.
yeah.
So standards are good. And I think we also have, humanity has this desire to cling to certainty. And so it feeds this urge to control everything, because I just want to predict what's going to happen, because if I can predict what's going to happen, I will be safe. And if I'm safe, then I can live in this construct. There's a really good book that I have read, and it's called When Things Fall Apart. And it talks about how these monks would go and meditate, and the facilitator would facilitate, like, okay, this is exactly how you meditate. And he would tell them exactly how to do it. And right when they felt like they were mastering it, he would say, actually, that's not how we meditate. We meditate like this. And he would change it on them. And so right when their ego started saying, I know, I can predict, I'm in control, he said, actually, what you're thinking, your perspective is no longer valid. It's now like this. And so the flexibility of our ability to deal with the external and it not threaten our internal is coming back in my life to identity. And it's me having such clarity on who I am. And I am not what I do. I am not what people say about me. I am not my circumstances. I am a soul in a meat suit. I joke.
Yep, we joke about this all the time.
But I exist beyond space-time circumstance. And I get to embody different versions of myself. When my mom was diagnosed with cancer, and I had to embody being present for her when I couldn't fix anything and I couldn't solve anything and nothing was predictable. I was actually, me and my over masculine, this is a different season of my life. To your point, I'm evolving, but I was doing 75 hard. I was doing 75 hard when I was taking care of my mom when she was going through cancer. And so I had made this standard for myself about this is who I was going to be, how I was going to operate. I'm working out twice a day. I'm not drinking alcohol. I'm following a diet. I'm drinking a gallon of water. I'm meditating. And then I'm like in the ER, and then I'm in the hospital for a week. And I'm like, I have to be able to be fluid and offer myself a level of grace and forgiveness along this journey, because the rigidity was sacrificing my well-being. And now I'm on this journey of integration, and I don't think I have it all figured out by any stretch of the imagination, but to avoid the perfection performance trap, my belief within myself is 80%. If I can show up 80% out of 100 for what my standard is, I am making self-honoring choices. I also have this acronym AND, which I like to live in. And how I do that on a daily basis is, to your point, like courage choice habits happen multiple times in a day. And I get to be alerted to, oh, okay, I have a choice in this moment to notice that if I do this, is it self-honoring? Or if I do that, is it self-honoring? And I get to discern which is faith and which is fear. And sometimes my rigidity is out of fear, instead of it being out of a choice, being out of faith. So I didn't finish 75 hard when my mom got sick. I made it to 55 days, and I was happy with myself for the 55 days. And then I pulled an all-nighter with my mom, and she ended up passing away a little bit later than that. And in hindsight, I'm happy I didn't hold myself to that rigidity, because I was there holding her hand when her soul transitioned. And so for me, I know everyone's standards are different. Some people would have powered through and made sure they did 75 hard, and others would have done what I did and allowed themselves grace. I think it's a personal choice. I think what it is making sure you're keeping the promises you made to yourself and not letting yourself off the hook. And that's an inner dialogue that you have with the divine, God, universe, source, whatever you want to call it. And you only know. Like, did you live in integrity, or are you out of integrity? And going back to that quote, is keeping the promises you made to yourself is what creates success. And how I define success is inner congruence. Are you congruent on the inside? And again, only you will know. And it's a choice that we get to make every single day. And if people around you are saying, hey, you're out of integrity, you're out of congruence, then that's an alert too, to say, where do I need to look at my shadow and integrate and heal?
I love that, and the only thing that hit my intuition, because this is something I feel like it's probably been one of my biggest traps in like going on 20 years of being an entrepreneur, is even in that that trap of talking about, and even you and talking about standards of like your call to be like, hey, you know what, like 55 days, like celebrate it. Like I've done 75 hard a ton, and everyone's like, I'm like, that was my life as a Marine for 13 years. 75 hard is like breakfast for me.
Mhm.
But there was one where I was like, no, I'm not doing this anymore. But I also realized one of the biggest traps I've fallen into was basing my decisions on other people's opinions of me instead of inner trust, right? Like thinking even through entrepreneurship, well, I have to have this funnel because they have that funnel, or I have to do my marketing this way because they do marketing that way, or I have to do this offer because that's how they said I should do it. But to your point of like the definition of success being inner congruence, I have to come up with like funny little things to remind myself to like really take into account how I feel. And I'm like, because in 50 years, when it's just me on, my deathbed and my son and my family holding my hand, they're not going to be there to give inputs or influence on that situation or determination. And I feel like even for you and knowing your story, it's not that when somebody said to go right, you went left. It was that when somebody said to go right, you went through your alert, notice, and discern process and asked yourself, like, how does this feel on the inside for me? Like, can I put my head on the pillow and be like, I made the right decision, but also being willing to look through that analogy that you gave earlier of courage, choices, and habits and be like, okay, am I being radically honest with myself? Not from a place of fault, blame, guilt, or shame, but like even for me, like when I was, 100 pounds heavier before you met me, really the challenge wasn't, it was the opposite. Nobody in my life said anything to me. They were just celebrating me. They're like, oh, you're crushing in business, you're doing blank. But I would be there. And I started catching myself being like, well, I guess I can never be under 200 pounds again. I guess I won't ever be a competitive athlete again. I would even tell myself the story of like, I can't weigh less than 200 pounds, but yet I had evidence of my entire life of being this competitive athlete, this Marine. And there was finally a moment where I had to be really, really honest with myself. And I'm like, you really mean in this moment right now that you can't turn off Netflix or YouTube and go for a 15-minute walk? And the challenge was is that nobody was challenging me, but I was also not challenging myself, to your point, because I was so out of alignment on the inside that I was like believing that whole story. And so even hearing you speak about this, it's such a powerful reminder. And even when you and I were on Zoom earlier talking about things we're going to be doing together, which keep your eyes peeled because Staci and I are we're getting to work. We got some recipes in the kitchen, and I'm so excited as somebody who's also come to our events and somebody I love to pieces because Staci added so much love and value to that event. But one of the things that I keep like kind of coming back to is this trap, even with your like the perfectionism trap and all those different pieces where it's like, oh, if I just go do these things, or if I do more of these things, or if I do, and really, even in the success that you've had, it's not doing all of these things. It's really doing the things that work, but doing them at a deep embodied level. But I think from what I've heard, the most important part is being honest with yourself at the deepest level, and being congruent with those behaviors is where like the biggest needle movers have come for you.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think you and I share this in common. Like when people ask, what do you want?
Yeah.
Knowing the answer to that, when you've invested most of your life in performance and perfection, it's a journey back to oneself.
Mm-hmm.
It's shedding all of the things where you hide. And one of the things to ask when you're trying to figure out what it is that you want is, what are you avoiding? So a lot of times figuring out who we are and what we want is in the thing that we're resisting. And when I did that with myself, I bought a beach cottage and I went and sat in it for 6 months and shut everything down and was really with myself. It was hard, it was messy, but it was authentic.
Mm.
And when we can be radically authentic with ourselves, and sit with the ugly, sit with the messy, sit with all the ways we've self-betrayed because we wanted to perform and we wanted that validation and we wanted that significance. And we can say what truly matters. My answer was, I want to garden and I want to make sourdough and I want to spend time with family and I want traditions and I don't want to be on my screen and I don't want to be building gazillions of businesses and I want to build businesses because I enjoy being good at something.
Mm-hmm.
That actually feeds my soul. Being good at something is good for me. I think working is good for me. I think it's good for humanity to work. And I think self-sacrificing and working 24/7 and not being embodied, not spending time in nature, not spending time working out and nutrition and hydration and soul community, I was sacrificing a lot of that in my performance and perfection. And so letting all of that go and having space and offering myself grace to really figure out who I am, what I want, and how do I want to show up, and what would I do if nobody recognized me for it? What would I say if nobody recognized me for it? If nobody affirmed me, nobody gave me a permission slip, and I was on that journey, and then I came to the Montana event, and then you gave me a permission slip, and I was
I
like,
did.
oh, this was just like a cherry on top because I was asked, I was called, and I was moving in the direction that I felt that was very aligned for me. And then God's grace is to let somebody that I respect, that had achieved some amazing things in business, that could offer me that, was just the cherry on top. And I'm so excited to what you said, like us doing things together and us sharing not just our business success and frameworks and playbooks and growth there that so many people can use to facilitate their own transformation in business, but also the soul journey that we've been on. You know, everyone has to soldier their own, but I think that people that have gone through the dark night of the soul, who have learned how to wake up in their dream life and make it feel, facilitate a feeling of what we want it to be like, and then encourage people to come along that same journey, is in alignment for me. I
Mm-hmm.
think that is a gift now that I get to give the world. And I didn't know really what it was going to look like. But now, with a year going and me being authentic and the alignment being there, I'm attracting a tribe of people, you being one of them, and hopefully your audience and all these people we get to connect with being one of them, to go on it with us and it not be something that defines our worth, but something that defines our joy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did a story on this the other day because I was having a conversation with a private client and they were reflecting back. We just did a 3-day intensive
Mm.
and we were talking about vision and I broke it down in a very, very different way. And you know, this is one of my quote unquote self-aware shortcomings, but like just so everybody knows, I was crying to Stacy on a Zoom call about our stuff earlier. And I was like, even leading into like having support, right? I was like, Stacy, this is me asking for help, just a perspective and somebody to be in the corner. But it led to this interesting reflection because we talk about vision, right? And I think a trap that people fall into is vision is how many customers you have and how many pieces of money you make and all of this. And when I was breaking down this vision to bring a team together, right, in 3 days, like we created clarity for the first time in the entire life of this business. And it's a 7-figure business. And it made it there through a whole lot of doing and a whole lot of transactions, but it was stuck and stagnant. And I was like, well, no, no, no. Like, how vision is built is number one. It's like, what are your core values? And not 3 things that you put on the wall, but like, what's your identity as a team? Like, if somebody was looking for the outside and then you couldn't tell them what you did, how would they describe you? Right? Like, what are those values? And I was like, 3 to 4 of them. And I was like, great. Now, what are your principles? And your principles being, what are the bumpers on how we operate every day? Like, one of them that we came up with was like, be the bison, right? To your point earlier, it's walk into the hard conversation, walk into the storm. I'm like, but not attached to results and not attached to revenue and not attached to clients. And I was like, now, great. If you take those two, what are the outcomes that they create? Right. And then they're like, so basically what you're saying is, I don't have a vision unless I can describe what I do and the difference I make without revenue, numbers, metrics, and analytics. I'm like 1000%, right? It's a picture in the direction that you want to go, in the world that you want to live in, but not attached to the how in which you get there. And I think for me, and I don't think I've ever talked about this, and one of the things that you experienced at the event, and I think I even mentioned this at the event, is even, knowing that most people listen to this, you and I both are entrepreneurs, the business itself for me is like the playbook, right? These are the plays that we execute as a football team, right? There's a vision that comes with that, but then there's also the player. And the player has to become the person who can execute that playbook, which has its own separate vision. And I think one of the things that I notice, and I see, and myself included, is that I fell into this, and a lot of people I've coached have fallen into this, to where their entire self vision is a byproduct, or the identity is attached to the business, which actually prevents it from ever happening. And I think the most important thing is recognizing that both are true at the same time. And we have to focus and work on both of them, or else, even to our point that we were talking about on Zoom earlier, you end up with what you thought your identity and vision was. You have your exit, you have your $1 million a year business. Even for some people, you have your $250,000 a year business that buys you freedom to do what you love, but yet now you're starting to dread it, and it doesn't light you up anymore, because it was really just a vehicle to get somewhere that we didn't identify. And I think one of the most powerful questions that you said is like, what do you want? But like, not on paper, right? Not like, oh, this number in the bank account, but like, what does your soul want? Like, when you wake up and you design your dream day, like, what does it actually look like? Is it time alone in nature? Is it having a garden? For you and I were joking about making sourdough. Like, we're like, all right, sourdough starters. And I was like, girl, I love making sourdough, right? Like, there's these moments that like fill our soul that allow us the energy and the capacity to then go use that business as a vehicle to have more of those things. And I wanted to ask you a question about this because, just, and I'll let you give some context maybe for like how operationally of a ninja that you are, and like what you built and how much you were running and how many companies you build. But to your previous point too, is like, we need standards and we need structure. I think an important distinction, and I would love your take on this as somebody who also is very equally embodied in the doingness, but also the embodiment of this, is that there are going to be quote unquote workouts that have to be executed that maybe aren't things that you love doing, but they're a get to be done to have that vision and have that result. Like, let's be honest, if I had it my way, I'd have a chocolate croissant and chocolate chip pancakes for breakfast every day, right? I would literally be eating like fried chicken buffalo poutine, which I had yesterday, for lunch every day, and I'd be eating pasta for dinner. But there's a part of me that wants to live to 100 to be around with my great grandkids and still doing backflips. And so, as much as I don't like counting my macros or going on steps every day, it's this thing that, like, from a standard or accountability, I'm like, I'm choosing this path because it gives me the goal that I want. And so I would kind of love your thoughts on that, because you've danced in both worlds. You've danced in the masculine building it all, but then also in the embodiment, adjusting and really working on inner congruence. And so I would just love your thoughts on that.
Hmm. I don't feel like I have it figured out, but
I don't think any of us do.
this is what I'm actively working on.
Mm-hmm.
The masculine frame, I did really well. I
Mm-hmm.
organized to scale 36 businesses in 36 months. There was a lot of zeros in it.
More than I knew was possible, just for
And
clarity.
there was a plot twist in it
Yep.
that really turned the lights on for me, that I'm grateful for. And there's two things that happened that were incredibly powerful in awakening me to this land of this world of where I could be structure and driven and ambitious and hard charging, because it feels good to be good at something. It feels good to win. It feels good to feel accomplished. It feels good, and I enjoy that. Just like you, like, it feels good to have the body you want. It feels
Yeah.
good to have the tribe. It feels good to stand on stage. Those are things that feel good. And then I realize, at the expense of what?
Yeah.
At the expense of my family, my dinner table, my health, my sanity, my peace of mind, my intuition, I realized when I was all gas, I lost connection with myself. And the God gave me the opportunity to reset and the grace to take the reset. And I'm so grateful for that because it has allowed me to step into this world where there can be both. I can build businesses, and what that has materialized in my life is more collaboration. I was more of a lone ranger, and I did things a lot by myself, and I had strategic partners in such, but I did a lot of the business on my own. And now I'm partnering with people, and I'm collaborating with people, and I'm aligning with people, and I people are like, you're not controlling at all, like you don't really care. And I'm like, that's because my identity has nothing to do with this now. Like whether it materializes or it doesn't define my self-worth. And so my integration was to listen to my intuition. And I found in my life, in order for me to listen to my intuition, I had to spend time in nature. Had to. I had to be hiking. I had to be off screens, off computers. I even had to take a pause on developing myself. And my sister, she really helped me in this time because I have been an avid personal development person. I have gone to all the seminars. I have hired all the coaches and therapists and journeys. And I mean, just I do the work. I read a book a week. Like I'm in it. And she asked me this. And so if you're a high achiever and you're in that vein, this is a question that might resonate with you. She said, could you trust that you're being developed if you're not developing yourself? And I realized, like, wow, God's got me. He is putting things and people in my life. He's putting things on my path for me to develop and grow. And even if I did nothing and just was living my life and being in service, things would cross my path. And so then I spent a year just living in that. Okay, well, I'm just going to post once a day on what's on my heart on social media. I'm going to start a podcast because I like talking to people and it's fun for me to do. I'm going to go to a Montana event because it seems like these people are integrating business and spirituality. I want to see what that's about. And I was just doing it because I was playing, not because I was performing, not because I was trying to become perfect, but just because I was playing. And then the playfulness turns into more collaborations, more business opportunities. And now I'm living in this world where I am actually exercising my muscle of no. Some of these clients, I'm like, it's not in alignment. Not saying no for forever, but not now. Let's see where we could pick this up in the future. I have blocked off days on my calendar. So every Friday, I have no calls. And most Mondays, I don't. But George is a special guy. And so we got to get on and talk today, which I just feel like this is just like soul coffee for me.
Yep, me too. Me too.
But I've put frameworks in place for myself where I call it having my soul in my body. And if my soul has to leave my body for me to do my execution, my action, my doing, it's not in alignment for me.
God, I love that. I love that. And I also love what you said too about you're no longer performing, you're just playing.
Mm.
And I think that that's one of the biggest secrets too, because I was having this conversation with one of my one-on-one clients the other day, and they're like, why would I do this no matter how much money comes in if I'm not having fun in the process? It just seems like it would be easier to get a predictable 9 to 5 and not have to navigate the stress and the pressure of being an entrepreneur. And I was like, I think that's probably one of the most profound things that you can have an awareness of like,
Mm-hmm.
there has to be this level of play and inner congruence and loving it in order for it to work, because it really is. I think with even myself included, like, and I've heard many of my friends that are, centimillionaires and billionaires say this to me, and they're like, you're guaranteed to succeed as an entrepreneur as long as you stay in the game long enough. But if it's not fun, you're going to quit the game and never give yourself the chance to get there. But like, when you said basically play, don't perform. Like every single quote unquote success I had, like all the labels that people celebrated me for, like, oh, is it 22-week New York Times bestseller, number one app, you had 6 million people on your website, you sent an email that made $250,000, like all those things. None of those things were from my heart. And it's so interesting because all the things that came from those, the houses, the cars, the status, I don't have any of them anymore, and I'm the happiest I've ever been driving my Subaru out back around Montana, just like popping in the mountains because my soul is genuinely happy, right? And I think that, to your point earlier, there's two ways to go about this game, and you either allow, for me and you, it's God, to take it away and create the fire, or you intentionally create the fire on your own proactively to find that clarity and to find that drive and to find that desire in the way that you even communicate about this. Like it's so, and I'll say this too, like even like we jumped on earlier, I'm like, girl, you're radiating. And I remember when you walked into the house in Montana and I was like, okay. And like within 3 days, I like watched you butterfly yourself from like the fear, the rigidity, all that previous residue. And you're like, no, I'm going to give myself a permission slip right now. I'm going to leave it right here in Montana. And then I'm going to fly. And then like watching you fly is like the most beautiful, beautiful thing like I've ever witnessed. Like it's like a gift. And I think it really, and even this is a deep reminder for me of like, and by the way, thank you for being so honest about the fact that I will own that I don't have any of this figured out either. I'm just sharing things that have worked for me and that allow me to be this happy. And even in seasons of my life now, where like on the outside in, some of my best friends are like, how are you so happy with what's going on? And I was like, well, what's my other choice? Right? Like if I believe in my God, which I do wholeheartedly, and he's the God of yesterday, the God of today, and the God of tomorrows, there's only one reason that this is popping up in front of me right now, and it's an opportunity, right? Like I asked God for love, and he's like, great, well, here's an opportunity to love. I asked God for patience, and he's like, great, well, let's stretch that muscle for you. And I'm like, oh, perfect, right? Like it's this consistent game of growth and integration, and to your point of self-trust, of like, I genuinely believe that like if it's showing up because it's my opportunity, it's my gym, right? And we go to the gym and we stretch and we celebrate the pain to avoid the suffering, but we celebrate. We're like, oh God, this run sucks. But you know what? I'm going to finish it and it's going to hurt a little bit because it's going to make me stronger. And I'm like, that same lens in life makes it go from pain to opportunity. And it's like, no, this is how we grow. Like, this is how we stretch. This is what we do. And even looking at you and like knowing all that you achieved, none of those lessons leave. They just become tools in a toolbox that then you have at your disposal to use when needed and required. And it doesn't mean you're never going to go build a team again or a company again, but who you became in the process makes you, quite frankly, a dangerous weapon, because now you're like, oh, I can do this with my heart now. I'm like, oh, you think you have a business problem? No. We'll fix that in about 2 minutes. Now let's handle that, because I walked through that for 10 years. And like, I think for me, like relatively young, I'm only 40, but I think that's the part that has shifted the most for me in the last year, as I used to dread it and fear it. And I'd end up in those rumination cycles, just like you, like, I'm going to disappear for 6 months. I'm going to go do blank. I'm like, oh, no, those are a part of the process. Like, I'm just getting tools added to my toolbox.
Yeah.
And then I might not need it right now, and I might not need it ever again. But if I ever do, that tool is in there. Like, I did that. I remember that. I know how to feel that. But the most important thing is that I feel it in my soul, and I'm doing it for the right reasons, right? Because it's important to me, where it lights me up, where I get to play and have fun. And so even so much of what you said just resonates so deeply.
And I think one of the tools we earned in the journey was the wisdom to know which tool to use when. I think that for me has been the integration journey, the alignment journey,
Yeah.
because when you have so many tools and you know, oh, I'll just run this funnel, or I'll just hire this person and put them in this place and they'll run that play, or I will just partner with so and so, or hey, I will run this ad, or I'll do this thing, and so predictable, you could just throttle whenever you wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to do that, just like all gas. And then the wisdom that I earned in this whole journey has been when to use the gas, when to use the brake. when to go park my car, when to take a break, take a rest, when to re-engage, when to take the passenger seat.
Mm.
There's so much wisdom that we have earned now, and the grace to play the game differently,
Yeah.
and then choose who we're playing with. Because
Mm.
most people, when we play in life, we play with people. You don't take your boat out by yourself. You usually do these things with people.
Mm-hmm.
And even the wisdom to choose the right people.
Yeah. God, so profound. You know, it reminds me too, and complete non sequitur, but I have to say it. Back when I had some of those things that I thought were important, like my race car, I went and did a driving school with BMW, and I was
Mm.
stoked. It was 3 days of like competitive driving, right?
I
And
wonder if I could beat you because I've done it too. No, just
well,
kidding. I'm being
now
my alpha in my.
now it's game on. And here's the thing that I'm very comfortable with. I'm very comfortable with losing now because I'm like, I'm just going to enjoy the process. But I remember the first day, they let us basically take the cars out and they're like, all right, this is the track, this is the boom, this is the
Mhm.
boom. And I'll just never forget this quote. I didn't realize I could learn so much from a race car driver, but we come back into the room and we're debriefing and they're smoking us, right? And they're like, there's a ton of like alpha dudes in the room, like really like, oh, we're going to beat everybody. And they're like, okay, cool. Like now we're going to talk about strategy. And I was like, all right, cool. And he's like, there's two pedals in the car. Which one wins races? And every one of us screams gas pedal, right? Gas, 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 gas. And he's like, wrong. Brakes win races. Brakes do. And I was like, huh? And my whole brain just like broke
Mhm.
because he's like, you're trying to power your way through and gas your way through. And he's talking about weight transfer and tire traction and timing and all of it. And I just remember leaving and I was like, this is probably one of the deepest lessons of wisdom I've ever learned in my life, to where it's not ever just more gas, 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 gas. There's two pedals in the car for a reason. And most of us, myself included, use the wrong ones because, even to your point earlier, just being able to stop and be alerted and to notice and discern cannot happen when you're going 150 miles an hour. When you're in that game, you're stuck in the pill bottle and it's like a reset. Like even one of the models we teach, it's like just take 5 minutes and change your state. Like go outside, take a breath. And I'm like, most of us wait till it happens to us. We're like so overwhelmed. We're so like in the weeds and we're like, I can't handle this anymore. I'm going for a run. And then we cry. And on the other side of the tears is like nothing but clarity. And I'm like, and what if we just proactively created that space and we made it a part of our day? And even all the way back to the beginning of the podcast, where you can't do your way to clarity. Like you can't do your way to alignment. You have to be it. And being it is like having, to your point, the discipline and the standard of like, you know what? I'm going to put this in my calendar. And every Friday, I'm going to go do this. And every Monday, I'm not going to take a call till 10 because I'm going to make sure I go walk out in nature to allow me to tap into that intuition and that inner voice. Like such profound wisdom that are tied to so many pieces. And even just reminds me of like, thank you for the reminder, because the other trap, and you and I are the same, of like, oh, I'm going to win every personal development conference. I'm going to read all 1,000 books. Like you're going to certify me in hypnosis and NLP and I'm going to know all the tools, but never actually allow myself the space to use them or to feel them or to discern the difference, is such a powerful, poignant reminder of like what actually moves the needle, in the lens of also being congruent and allowing us the energy to play and the excitement to go into it. And to your point earlier at the beginning of the show, not dreading it and not feeling like you're a victim to the vehicle that you created for freedom, and allowing yourself to feel that now, and then making choices that are in alignment to keep that and making adjustments as you go. Like it's such a deep, deep, deep piece of wisdom and a poignant reminder that tickles at the deepest level right now.
Yeah, it reminds me, I was thinking about this the other day, actually, when I was at the beach cottage. And I feel like whether you're an entrepreneur or in just a human in life on a journey, we get to this moment that is our enough is enough moment. And we say, I can't keep operating like this. I've got to do something different. And you're putting on the table, could we potentially do that sooner? Or do we all have to hit this enough is enough moment? I don't know. I'm pretty stubborn. So for me, it was I had to hit the enough is enough moment. And when we do, you can either numb or you can kneel. And numbing isn't just what we think, like, you know, drugs, sex, alcohol, partying. It's also workaholism. It's also self sacrificing. It's also people pleasing. It's not saying no. We numb in so many other ways that society has called normal, but
Mm-hmm.
it's not healthy.
Mm-hmm.
And I've done all those things, so I'm not shaming or blaming anyone, but that's numbing. And then kneeling, I had to reinvent what that meant for me because I was raised in religion.
Mm-hmm.
And so kneeling was not like a thing for me. And I also really value structure to kind of what we were talking about in this like integration. So when I was at the beach cottage, I created for myself what I called 75 divine discipline. And I literally had about 5 things I wanted to do in a day. In my previous version would have been like, okay, you're waking up at 5, at 5:05 you're out of bed, then you're doing like I was so rigid. And then my divine discipline self was like, okay, well, I would like to go walk the beach, and I would like to read today, and I would like to meditate today, and I would like to call somebody today, and I would like to spend 2 90-minute focus sessions. And so I had them on my list, and then I would wake up and say, what feels most aligned for me to do first? And sometimes I would be in my 90-day GSD mode, and I would do that first, and then I'd go walk the beach, and then I'd make a phone call, and it was so fluid. I was like, oh wow, I could still get everything done that I want to get done and not arm wrestle myself every day in the process. And so divine discipline became my way of kneeling, and it was this way of saying that I could do both. I can live in a world of and. I could have structure and grace and the play in the day versus the day being so forced and having focused time to play. The whole day became played and it became fun again. And that was my personal journey back to alignment, was not throwing the baby out with the bathwater because their discipline and structure is good, but arm wrestling with myself was painful
Mm-hmm.
and it was hurting my ability to listen to my intuition. And what the wild thing is, what I found when I did this with myself was I actually did more things. I remember one day I wanted to make bread and I wanted to call people and I had the whole laundry. I had this whole list of things that I wanted to do and I didn't want to do it. And so it was Sunday, and in light of me wanting family traditions, I was like, okay, Stace, you can sit down and you could watch some football for 30 minutes since for whatever reason you have no interest in doing this. I sat down and did that for maybe I lasted 20 minutes because I'm not a TV person just naturally, but a part of me was being a little rebel. And so I let the rebel come out for 20 minutes. And then next thing I know, I'm like, ultra doing things. I've got music playing and I'm enjoying the journey of doing versus forcing myself to do. And so that kneeling process has been my journey to alignment too. And I think divine discipline brings some fluidity and femininity and soul to the discipline
Yeah.
instead of force.
Yeah, I love it. It's like having flexibility with your ability, as you said earlier.
Yes.
Yes, I love it. And I love how, just because we've talked about congruence and we're about to land the plane, I love how even congruent you are throughout the whole show of
Mm.
like getting back to the same takeaway and the same piece of wisdom in multiple different wrapping papers to really have that congruence and ability to support yourself. And I agree about the discipline. I even noticed too, like I was on a trip a couple of weeks ago and I was staying in a friend's house and I stay in the basement and there's not really natural daylight.
Mm.
And I realized that like without it, I've been like laying there and I was ruminating and like really in dark thoughts and all of it. And then like I'd get outside in the sun, which I normally do every day at home in Montana. And all of a sudden my energy shifted drastically. And I'm like, all right, here's what I'm gonna go do. I'm like, 20 minutes ago, I was convinced like everything was burning and everything was gone. And I was like, oh man, like I fell victim to not having my discipline of like, hey, did I open my Bible? Did I go get my fresh air? Because like one of the things I do every morning as soon as I wake up, barefoot, shirtless, outside, regardless of weather. And I was like, oh, I traveled. I stopped doing it. And it's just these little like subtle, consistent cues to really like activate and to stay in our power and stay in alignment. But that discipline is such a big, big, big part of it. Of like, even to your point earlier when you were talking about the three with courage, choices, and habits, part of those habits is aligning around ourselves the things that will environmentally remind us of what we said and who we said we wanted to be when our brains are taking over, or the excuses are there, or the fear is there, to allow that flexibility and then the ability to go into them and be activated into them, into our intuition, into our guidance, like into whatever lights us up for play. So I love that. So before I forget, your Instagram is popping, and I think that's where everybody should find you. But can you give everybody your Instagram real quick, because I completely
Yeah,
forgot?
I know. I don't know what's going on, but I'm getting lots of love on Instagram. So come join me. It's Staci, Staci underscore Gray, Gray.
Yeah, and we'll put it in the show notes. So it's Staci_Gray, and I know why it's popping, because it's you, it's in alignment, it's embodied, and you share things that actually help people, and it's magical. And so I'm a big fan. And so everybody, make sure that you connect with Staci on Instagram. You will be hearing from Staci a whole lot more, because Staci will be back on the podcast, because I selfishly would do this with her every day because it's my soul coffee as well. And we got some things in the pipeline. Staci's been to our events. We have another event coming up in November in Montana. If you haven't grabbed your seat, grabbed your ticket, I would highly recommend going to mindofgeorge.com/event. And I've never done this before, Stace, but I feel called, and I'm trusting myself and my intuition. If somebody was on the fence about coming to our event, to somebody who's been to one of my events, what would you say to them right now?
I've we heal in community.
Mm,
And it's so easy to sit behind our screens and think that we're connected.
mm.
And it's counterfeit connection.
Oh, counterfeit connection.
And so if you're on the fence about going, I obviously love George and I love his community. And I didn't know him. So when I went in November, I didn't know who he was. I only met him 5 months ago. Not even. I don't even know how long ago it was. When did I even go? I don't even know. It was August. I didn't know him. I only knew what he put online. And like he said, when I walked in, within 5 minutes, it was like, I'm home.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're tired of counterfeit connection and wondering where you belong or how to build your business with your heart in it, and you're desiring to find people who are doing that, who are having all of their soul in their body, having hard conversations to help them alchemize the pain and the trauma that they've experienced, and get to a place of alignment so you can build and scale your business if that's what you choose to do, build and scale your life, build and scale your relationships, whatever it is that feels in alignment and authentic for you, and you're looking for authentic connection and community to do it with, and then go to the event in Montana.
Mm.
And Montana is just good for the soul in general. You
Yeah.
will be out in nature. You will have your feet on the ground. You will see mountains and sunrises and sunsets and dinner table conversations. And you'll leave with not just new ahas for yourself, but a new place to land when life inevitably will get hard in the future.
Mm. Well, I'm really glad that I asked that question, because I'm like tickled and on the verge of tears over here. And it's been 2 months, and you're forever my soul sister and stuck with me unless you get a restraining order, and then I'll still find you anyways. So let
Because
me
you have
just be,
that skill set.
yeah, let me just be really, really honest with it, because I love really, really hard. And so, yeah, and this one, the Airbnb we got a beautiful one, and it's on the river too. And so it's literally right on the river, the North Fork, that is all the glacier runoff from Glacier National Park. So we are deep in. And so I thank you for saying that, and thank you for Yeah, just thank you for saying that. And I appreciate it immensely. So for everybody listening, I'm going to take all of this soulful coffee that Stacy gave me today, and I'm going to write down a lot of notes that I already wrote down and take some of these as poignant reminders of, continuing to be in the process. And the thing that I want to say to everybody is like, if something tickled, if something landed, if anything Stacy or I said resonated, let this be your permission slip to give it a chance, to take that break, to go out in nature, to align, to alert yourself, notice what's there, discern, to have the courage to then align the choices, to then have habits and fill people in with you, and take it from somebody who I highly admire and respect and am humbled by, as somebody who's walked all of this and is speaking from 100% experience and has every receipt to show you what happens, because everything underneath this is real and authentic. And I watch her unlock this magic for herself and so many other people as being embodied and walking it. Take a chance, and I will selfishly say this: if anything resonated, if anything landed, send Stacy a message on Instagram, because I know she would love to hear about it and connect with you, because this is my sister in all of this, and I'm really honored. And so, Stacy, thank you so much for being here and spending all this time with me today, since I selfishly got to steal like 3 hours of your time today.
It was a good Monday. I like it. We should have
Yeah,
more
this is my
like
best Monday. If every Monday just has 3 hours of Stacy in it, the rest of my week is magical. So I might selfishly work on that. And so, thank you. And then, yeah, any saved rounds or closing words for everybody?
this. Thank you for creating space, for being a lighthouse when things get dark, for reminding people of who they are and what's respectable as a human being. And I think the world has lost its way in a lot of ways, and we need more lighthouses. And you're not just a personal lighthouse, but you're also a wick lighter. You help turn the lights on for other people. And it's beautiful to be on this journey with you
Thank you.
and to start seeing the world with optimism and grace and authenticity. So thank you. And to your audience, I hope that we get to connect and you get to organize and scale your businesses and you get to return to yourself so you do it all in alignment as well.
Mm. Can't do anything but put a bow on that one. So I feel like this is echoed, that relationships will always beat algorithms, but you have more evidence of today that the most important one is with yourself. And so apply it there and then give it away to everybody around you. Know you're not alone. Know you got cheerleaders, and know that people and community can support you, because there is only one you. Your vision matters, and your ability to execute it is the difference in the world. And so go be you, go be unique. And if we can support you in any way, please let us know. So have a beautiful day. And we'll either see you in the next episode or you'll hear me in your earballs. But either way, we're out.